The transport ship carrying 12 human cadets docked at Kepler Station with a soft mechanical hum. Outside the thick glass windows, the massive structure stretched across space like a crystal city. The Galactic Military Academy looked more like an art museum than a training facility, with its smooth walls and glowing blue lights. Lieutenant Danny Cooper stepped off the transport first, his brown hair still messy from the long journey. Behind him came 11 other humans, all wearing the standard gray uniforms of Earth's military. They looked around the docking bay with wide eyes. Everything here was bigger than they expected. The ceiling stretched up so high they could barely see the top. "Welcome to Kepler Station," said a deep voice behind them. The humans turned to see Commander Zethkar walking toward them. He stood nearly 8 feet tall, with dark green scales covering his muscular body. His yellow eyes studied each human carefully. "I am Commander Zethkar of the Draknari people. I will be your guide during your first week here." Danny stepped forward and saluted. "Lieutenant Danny Cooper, sir. These are my fellow cadets from Earth." Zethkar nodded slowly. His long tail moved back and forth behind him as he walked. "Follow me. There are many others waiting to meet you." As they walked through the station's hallways, the humans saw their first alien cadets. A group of insect-like creatures with 4 arms were practicing combat moves in a training room. Their movements were precise and graceful, like a dance. Through another window, they saw tall blue beings covered in what looked like living water. These creatures moved by floating just above the ground. "Those are Vexti and Merlins," Zethkar explained. "The Vexti come from a desert world where they learned to fight in perfect formation. The Merlons are from an ocean planet. They believe in fighting only when necessary to protect others." Sergeant Lisa Hayes walked beside Danny. She was smaller than most of the other humans, but her green eyes were sharp and alert. "How many different species train here?" she asked. 12, including your people," Zethkar answered. "This is the first time humans have joined our academy. Many are curious about your species." They entered a large room filled with cadets from different worlds. The noise was incredible. Some aliens spoke in clicks and whistles. Others made sounds like singing. A few seemed to communicate without making any sound at all. Near the center of the room stood Colonel Jake Morrison, the only other human already at the station. He had been working with the Academy for 3 months to prepare for this moment. His gray beard and calm manner made him look older than his 45 years. "Danny, Lisa, good to see you made it safely," Morrison said as he walked over. "Let me introduce you to some of our fellow cadets." A creature that looked like it was made of pure light floated toward them. It had no solid body, just glowing energy in the shape of a person. When it spoke, its voice sounded like music. "I am Brightwing of the Luminari," it said. "We have heard much about your people, but we know very little. Your planet is still new to the Federation." Danny smiled. "We're happy to be here. We hope to learn from everyone." A large insect with silver armor approached next. Its 4 arms moved independently as it walked on 2 legs. "I am Clickstar of the Vexti Hive. Your species appears to have no natural weapons or armor. How do you survive on your world?" The question made several other aliens stop their conversations to listen. Lisa answered carefully. "We use tools and work together. Humans are good at adapting to different situations." An aquatic creature flowed over to join them. Its body was like living water held in the shape of a person. "I am Aquanina of the Merlon depths. Your people seem very solid. Do you ever find peace in your rigid forms?" The humans looked at each other. These questions were harder to answer than they expected. Morrison stepped in to help. "Every species has developed differently. Humans learn to survive by being flexible and persistent." Zethkar clapped his large hands together, making a sound like thunder. All cadets Please gather for the opening ceremony. The room filled with hundreds of beings from across the galaxy. Some were tall, others were small. Some had fur, others had scales or metal skin. A few seemed to be made of living rock or crystal. The humans realized they were among the most ordinary-looking creatures in the room. Admiral Vortex stepped onto a raised platform. He was made of living crystal that reflected light in rainbow patterns. When he spoke, his voice echoed through the room like wind chimes. Welcome, cadets, to this historic gathering. For the first time in Federation history, we have representatives from 12 different worlds training together. Each of your species brings unique knowledge and abilities to our shared mission of peace. The Admiral's crystal body shifted colors. As he continued, over the next month, each species will present their military history and traditions. You will learn from each other and grow stronger together. The Federation faces new challenges, and we must be prepared. Several alien cadets made sounds of agreement. Some clicked, others hummed, and a few glowed brighter. The schedule for presentations has been arranged, Vorthek announced. The Draknari will begin tomorrow, followed by the Merlins, then the Vexti. Each species will have 2 days to share their knowledge. Danny raised his hand. Admiral, when will Earth present? Vorthek's crystal body flickered. The humans have requested to present last. They say they need time to select appropriate materials. This caused whispers throughout the room. Many aliens turned to look at the small group of humans. Some seemed curious, others appeared confused. After the ceremony ended, the cadets broke into smaller groups to eat and socialize. The humans found themselves surrounded by aliens asking questions. What kind of weapons do your people prefer? Asked a rock-like being covered in metal spikes. How do you organize your military without a hive mind? Clicked a Vexti warrior. Do you have ancient codes of honor like the Draknari? Rumbled a creature that looked like a walking tree. The humans answered as best they could, but they kept their responses general. Morrison had trained them to be polite, but careful about sharing too much information. As the evening continued, it became clear that most alien species viewed warfare very differently than humans did. They spoke of combat as an art form, with strict rules and traditions. Many seemed to think of military service as a way to show honor rather than to actually fight wars. The last real war in our sector ended 50 years ago, explained Brightwing. Most conflicts are resolved through negotiation or single combat between champions. Our people have not fought a true battle in over a century, added Aquanina. We maintain our military traditions to preserve our culture, not because we expect to use them. Danny and Lisa exchanged glances. This was very different from Earth's military thinking. On their world, armies trained constantly because they expected to fight. Peace was temporary, and war was always possible. Later that night, the humans gathered in their quarters to discuss the day. Their room was simple but comfortable, with 12 beds and a common area. They seemed to think military. Service is mostly ceremonial, Lisa said quietly. Did you notice how they talked about warfare? Asked Private Ben Clark, one of the younger cadets. Like it's some kind of sport with rules. Morrison nodded thoughtfully. The Federation has been peaceful for a long time. Most of these species haven't fought real wars in generations. What happens when they see our presentation? Danny wondered aloud. Morrison was quiet for a long moment. That's what we're here to find out. Command wants to know how the other species will react to our military history. Outside their windows, the stars shone brightly in the endless darkness of space. The Academy continued its slow rotation, providing artificial gravity for its diverse inhabitants. Tomorrow would bring new lessons and new challenges as the humans began to understand just how different their species was from the rest of the galaxy. As they prepared for sleep, none of the humans could imagine the shock they would soon deliver. to their alien classmates. The presentations would begin in just a few hours, and the galaxy was about to learn something new about the small, ordinary-looking creatures from the third planet of a yellow star. The next morning, all cadets gathered in the main presentation hall. The room was enormous, with seats arranged in curved rows that could hold over 500 beings. Large screens covered the front wall, and the lighting could be adjusted. For different alien vision types, Commander Zethkar stood at the center of the room, his scales gleaming under the bright lights. Behind him, other Dreknari warriors arranged their equipment and weapons for display. These items looked more like art pieces than tools of war. Each sword and shield was decorated with intricate patterns and precious metals. Today, we begin our military heritage presentations, Zethkar announced. My people, the Dreknari, will show you our ancient traditions of honorable combat. The lights dimmed, and the screens came alive with images of a desert world. Red sand stretched to the horizon under twin suns. In the distance, massive stone structures rose like pyramids, their surfaces covered with carved symbols. This is Draktherin, our homeworld, Zethkar explained. For over 3,000 years, we have settled our disputes through ritual combat. When two clans disagree, they choose champions to fight in single battle. The screen showed two Dreknari warriors, facing each other in a circular arena. Both wore ceremonial armor that gleamed in the sunlight. Thousands of spectators watched from stone seats surrounding the young fighting circle. The human cadets leaned forward in their seats, curious about what they were seeing. The alien combat was unlike anything they had studied on Earth. Observe the beginning of each match, Zethkar said. The warriors bow to each other and to the judges. They swear sacred oaths to fight with honor and accept the outcome with dignity. On the screen, the two fighters moved in slow, deliberate circles. Their weapons were long, curved swords that caught the light as they moved. When they finally engaged, their movements were precise and controlled. Each strike was calculated. Each defense was perfect. Beautiful, whispered Brightwing, the energy being. They fight like artists creating a masterpiece. The battle continued. For nearly 10 minutes. Both warriors showed incredible skill, but neither seemed desperate or angry. When one finally gained advantage and defeated the other, he immediately helped his opponent to his feet. The crowd cheered for both fighters equally. The winner claims victory for his clan, Zethkar explained, but the loser is honored for his courage and skill. Often, former enemies become close friends after such battles. More footage showed different types of Dreknari combat. Some used spears and shields, others fought with paired daggers. In every case, the rules were clear and both fighters followed them exactly. Deaths were rare and always accidental. Our greatest warriors are remembered not for how many enemies they killed, but for how beautifully they fought, Zethkar continued. A true Dreknari warrior wins through superior technique and noble spirit, never through tricks or cruelty. Danny Cooper took notes on a small tablet. This was very different from human military thinking. On Earth, soldiers were taught to win by any means necessary. Honor was important, but survival came first. The Dreknari presentation continued with scenes of their modern military. Their ships were sleek and powerful, designed to look as impressive as they were functional. Their soldiers trained in perfect formations, each movement coordinated with the others. We maintain our traditions even in space combat, Zethkar said proudly. When two ships meet in battle, their captains often arrange single combat between champions rather than risk the lives of entire crews. Lisa Hayes raised her hand. What happens if the enemy doesn't want to fight honorably? Zethkar looked confused by the question. Why would anyone choose to fight without honor? Victory without nobility is meaningless. Several alien cadets made sounds of agreement. The Vexti clicked their approval, while the Merlons hummed softly. Even the rock-like grenadiones nodded their massive heads as the Draknari presentation ended. Admiral Vorthik took the stage again. His crystal body reflected the lights in rainbow patterns as he spoke. "Thank you, Commander Zethkar, for sharing your people's noble traditions. Tomorrow, the Merlins will present their approach to military service." The next day brought a completely different perspective. The Merlins had transformed the presentation hall into something resembling an underwater environment. Blue lights created the illusion of being beneath ocean waves, and the temperature had been lowered to match the preferred conditions. Aquanina flowed to the center of the room, her water-like body moving in graceful patterns. Other Merlins arranged themselves around her, their forms shifting and changing like living liquid. "My people believe that conflict should be avoided whenever possible," Aquanina began. Her voice was soft and musical, like water flowing over smooth stones. "When fighting cannot be prevented, we seek to end it quickly with minimal harm to all involved." The screens showed the Merlon homeworld, a beautiful blue planet covered almost entirely by ocean. Cities floated on the surface, like flowers made of coral and pearl. Underwater, vast gardens of sea plants swayed in gentle currents. "War came to our world only once in our recorded history," Aquanina continued. "An aggressive species from a nearby system attempted to claim our oceans for themselves. We were forced to defend our homes." The footage showed Meilang defenders moving through their underwater cities. Their tactics were unlike anything the other cadets had seen. Instead of charging at enemies, they flowed around them like water, finding the path of least resistance. "We developed weapons that could disable attackers without permanent harm," Aquanina explained. "Our sonic disruptors could make enemies unconscious without injury. Our binding nets could trap ships without destroying them." On screen, Merlon, warriors surrounded enemy forces in perfect formations. Their movements were so coordinated, they seemed like one organism instead of many individuals. When they attacked, it was swift and precise, targeting only weapons and systems needed to stop the threat. "The war ended in less than 1 year," Aquanina said. "When the attackers realized they could not harm us without being captured, they agreed to peaceful negotiations. Many of their warriors chose to stay on our world and learn our ways." The human cadets exchanged glances. This approach to warfare was focused entirely on defense and minimal casualties. On Earth, wars were won by destroying the enemy's ability and will to fight. The Merlin presentation continued with examples of their modern military doctrine. They showed rescue operations where their ships saved survivors from destroyed vessels, even enemy survivors. They demonstrated training exercises where success was measured by how few casualties occurred. "We maintain our military not to conquer others, but to protect peace," Aquanina concluded. "Every life has value, even the life of an enemy. A victory that costs unnecessary lives is actually a defeat." The Vexti presentation came next. These insect-like beings had a different approach entirely. Their homeworld was a harsh desert where survival required perfect cooperation. Clickstar stood before the assembled cadets, his 4 arms moving in precise gestures as he spoke. Behind him, dozens of other Vexti arranged themselves in complex, geometric patterns. "Individual strength means nothing to the Vexti," Clickstar clicked. "We survive through unity and shared purpose. In battle, we move as one mind controlling many bodies." The screens showed massive Vexti hives rising from red sand dunes. These structures were architectural marvels with thousands of chambers, connected by tunnels and bridges. Everything was built with mathematical precision. "When conflicts arise, we do not send individual warriors," Clickstar explained. "Entire hives join together, their thoughts connected through shared consciousness. Victory comes through superior coordination and planning." The footage showed vexty military exercises that looked more like elaborate dances. Thousands of warriors moved in perfect synchronization, their formations shifting and changing without any visible signals being passed between them. We study our enemies for years before engaging them, Clickstar continued. Every possible outcome is calculated. Every tactical option is considered. When we finally act, victory is assured because we have already fought the battle 1,000 times in our minds. The alien cadets watched in fascination as vexty forces demonstrated their tactics. They could execute incredibly complex maneuvers that would be impossible for most species. Their ships moved in formation so tight they seemed like single objects. Casualties are rare in vexty warfare, Clickstar noted. When every warrior knows exactly what every other warrior will do, accidents and mistakes become impossible. We win through perfect execution of flawless plans. As the presentations continued over the following days, a clear pattern emerged. Every alien species viewed warfare as something to be conducted according to strict rules and traditions. Combat was either ceremonial, defensive, or highly organized. The luminaries showed how they resolved conflicts through shared mental experiences, allowing opposing sides to understand each other completely. The Granations demonstrated their method of settling disputes through contests of strength that resembled sporting events more than battles. Each species emphasized honor, minimal casualties, and the preservation of life. War was seen as a failure of diplomacy, something to be ended as quickly as possible with the least harm to all involved. The presentation hall was packed tighter than ever before. Word had spread throughout Kepler Station that the humans were finally going to show their military history. Cadets from all 12 species filled every seat, and some floated or stood. In the aisles, Colonel Morrison walked to the center of the room carrying a simple data pad. Unlike the other species, the humans had brought no weapons to display, no ceremonial armor, and no decorative banners. Morrison looked small and ordinary compared to the towering Draknari warriors or the graceful Merlin defenders who had presented before him. "Good morning," Morrison began, his voice calm and steady. "My name is Colonel Jake Morrison of the Earth Defense Forces. Today I will show you how humans approach military conflict." Behind him, the large screens remained dark. Morrison paused and looked around the room at the hundreds of eager alien faces. "Before we begin, I want to explain something about human warfare. We do not fight for honor or glory. We do not follow ancient traditions or ceremonial rules. When humans go to war, we fight to win, and we use whatever methods give us the best chance of survival." A few alien cadets shifted uncomfortably in their seats. This introduction was different from what they had heard before. Morrison touched his datapad, and the screens came to life. The first image showed a beach covered in smoke and fire. Human soldiers were running through chest-deep water while explosions erupted around them. Some fell and did not get up. Others stepped over their fallen comrades and kept moving forward. "This is Normandy Beach, June 6, 1944, Morrison said. 60,000 human soldiers attacked a fortified coastline defended by machine guns, artillery, and mines. They knew many of them would die, but the mission had to succeed. The footage was grainy and black and white, but the violence was clear. The alien cadets watched in growing shock as humans charged directly into enemy fire. When one soldier fell, another would pick up his weapon and continue forward. Clickstar raised one of his 4 arms. Why do they not retreat when facing certain death? Any rational being would withdraw and find another approach. Morrison nodded, because retreat was not an option. The success of the entire war depended on establishing that beachhead. Individual survival was less important than the mission objective. The concept seemed impossible for most aliens to understand. In their military traditions, unnecessary death was always avoided. The idea of deliberately sending soldiers to their deaths was horrifying. The footage continued, showing the aftermath of the beach landing. Thousands of human bodies lay scattered across the sand. Medical teams moved among the wounded, but many. Soldiers were beyond help. How many died? Asked Aquilina, her watery form shimmering with distress. Over 4,000 in the first day alone, Morrison replied. But the mission succeeded. Within a week, over 100,000 Allied soldiers had landed in Europe. The screens changed to show a different scene. Dense jungle filled the view, with humans moving carefully through thick vegetation. They carried weapons that looked crude compared to the elegant arms displayed by other species. This is Vietnam, 1965 to 1975, Morrison continued. Human soldiers fought an enemy they could rarely see in terrain that offered no advantages. The enemy used guerrilla tactics, hiding among civilian populations and striking without warning. The footage showed soldiers checking villages for hidden enemies. They moved from house to house, never knowing if the next door would hide a deadly trap. The stress on their faces was visible even through the old film quality. The enemy did not follow conventional warfare rules, Morrison explained. They dressed as civilians, used children as weapons carriers, and set explosive traps in seemingly innocent objects. Our soldiers had to adapt or die. Brightwing pulsed with confused energy. How do you fight an enemy who will not show themselves? How do you know who is a combatant and who is innocent? You don't, Morrison said simply. You learn to suspect. Everyone entrusts no one. You develop new tactics and technologies to find hidden enemies. You do whatever it takes to survive and complete your mission. The next footage was in color and much clearer. It showed human aircraft flying over a desert landscape, their weapons destroying targets on the ground with incredible precision. Desert Storm, 1991, Morrison announced. This demonstrates human technological adaptation. We used satellite guidance, stealth aircraft, and smart weapons to achieve victory with minimal casualties to our own forces. The alien cadets relaxed slightly. This looked more familiar, like the clean, precise warfare they were used to seeing. The human aircraft struck their targets efficiently and moved on. But then the scene changed again. Now they saw human soldiers moving through city streets, going from building to building. The fighting was close and brutal, with no room for ceremony or honor. Urban combat in Iraq and Afghanistan, Morrison continued. When technology cannot solve the problem, human soldiers adapt to fight in the most dangerous conditions imaginable. They clear buildings room by room, never knowing what waits behind the next door. The footage showed soldiers kicking down doors and rushing into dark spaces. Sometimes they faced armed enemies, sometimes they found civilians, and sometimes they walked into traps. The uncertainty was constant and terrifying. A Granite 1 cadet, his rocky body grinding with agitation, spoke up. This appears chaotic and uncontrolled. Where are the rules of engagement? Where is the honor? Morrison turned to face the alien directly. In urban warfare, the only rule is survival. Honor doesn't stop bullets or prevent ambushes. Our soldiers learn to be faster, smarter, and more ruthless than their enemies. The screens showed night vision footage of special operations teams conducting raids. The humans moved through darkness with perfect coordination, using advanced technology to locate and eliminate targets without being detected. These are our elite forces, Morrison explained. They operate behind enemy lines for weeks or months without support. They can survive in any environment and complete missions that would be impossible for conventional forces. The alien cadets watched in fascination and growing unease as human special forces demonstrated capabilities that seemed almost supernatural. They could appear and disappear like ghosts, strike without warning, and vanish before enemies could. Respond. Next came footage that made several aliens gasp in shock. Human soldiers were fighting in conditions that would kill most other species. They operated in freezing cold that would stop a Draknari, in heat that would boil a Murlan, and in toxic environments that would poison a Vexti. Human soldiers trained to fight anywhere, Morrison said. Arctic conditions, tropical jungles, underwater, in space, on worlds with different gravity or atmosphere. We adapt to any environment because we cannot choose where our enemies will force. Used to fight. The footage showed Marines training in icy water, soldiers marching through blazing deserts, and special forces operating on mountainsides, so high the air was too thin for most beings to breathe. But why? Asked a cadet from the Peaceful Harmony Collective. Why do you push your bodies to such extremes? Morrison's expression grew serious. Because when survival is at stake, there are no limits to what humans will endure. We would rather suffer in training than die in combat. The presentation took a darker turn as Morrison showed footage of strategic bombing campaigns. Entire cities disappeared under waves of explosive destruction. The scale of devastation was beyond anything the aliens had imagined possible. We call this total warfare, Morrison explained. When conventional methods fail, humans will destroy everything the enemy needs to continue fighting. Infrastructure, industry, supply lines, communication networks. We target not just their military, but their ability to make war. Several alien cadets stood up and left the room. The Harmony Collective representative looked physically ill. Even some of the warrior culture Draknari appeared disturbed by what they were seeing. You destroy entire cities? Zethkar asked, his voice strained. What about the civilians? What about the innocent? Morrison paused the footage. In total war, there are no true civilians. Everyone contributes to the war effort in some way. We try to minimize unnecessary deaths, but when our survival is threatened, we will do whatever is necessary to win. The room fell into shocked silence. This concept was so alien to their thinking that many cadets struggled to process what they were hearing. The bombing of cities helped end a war that had already killed over 60 million people, Morrison continued. It was a terrible choice, but it prevented an invasion that would have cost millions more lives on both sides. The screens showed the aftermath of the bombings. Entire metropolitan areas reduced to rubble and ash. The human capacity for destruction was staggering, but so was their ability to rebuild and continue fighting. As the presentation continued, one fact became increasingly clear to the alien observers. Humans did not just fight wars, they excelled at it. Every conflict had taught them new lessons, forced new adaptations, and made them more effective at warfare. The aliens were beginning to understand that they were not just watching historical footage. They were seeing the evolution of a species that had survived by becoming the most dangerous predators in their corner of the galaxy. Morrison continued the presentation as more alien cadets shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The room that had been packed with eager observers was now noticeably less crowded. Several empty seats marked where cadets had quietly left, unable to watch more of the human warfare footage. What you have seen so far represents conventional warfare, Morrison said, his voice remaining calm despite the growing tension in the room. Now I will show you what happens when humans face impossible situations. The screens changed to show a frozen wasteland covered in snow and ice. Buildings stood in ruins, their walls blown apart by artillery. Human soldiers moved through the wreckage wearing heavy coats, their breath visible in the frigid air. This is Stalingrad, winter of 1942, Morrison explained. German and Soviet forces fought for control of the city for over 5 months. The battle took place in temperatures that dropped 40 degrees below zero. The footage showed soldiers fighting from building to building, sometimes room to room. They used knives, clubs, and even their bare hands when ammunition ran out. Bodies lay frozen in the streets, covered by snow. The defending soldiers ate leather from their boots to survive, Morrison continued. They melted snow for water and fought for every inch of ground. When they ran out of weapons, they used broken glass and pieces of metal. Aquanina's watery form began to tremble. They fought in conditions that would kill most species within. Hours. How did they survive? They didn't all survive, Morrison replied. Over 1 million soldiers died in that battle. But the survivors kept fighting because surrender meant death anyway. When humans have no choice but victory or extinction, they choose to fight until the end. The next footage showed something that made several more aliens leave the room. Human soldiers were climbing out of trenches and running directly toward enemy machine guns. Many fell within seconds, but others kept coming. Wave after wave of attackers charged forward, stepping over the bodies of their fallen comrades. World War I, 1914 to 1918, Morrison said. Humans fought for 4 years in conditions that turned entire regions into muddy graveyards. They developed new weapons specifically designed to kill as many enemies as possible. The screens showed poison gas drifting across battlefields, turning the air itself into a weapon. They showed artillery bombardments that continued for days, turning the landscape into a cratered wasteland where nothing could survive. Over 17 million people died in that war, Morrison continued. But it taught us important lessons about industrial warfare and the need for better tactics. Clickstar's forearms were clicking rapidly, a sign of extreme agitation among the Vexti. Your species treats warfare as education. You learn from each conflict to become more effective killers. Yes, Morrison agreed without hesitation. Every war teaches us something new. We study our mistakes and adapt our methods. Human military. Doctrine is constantly evolving. The footage shifted to show something that horrified the remaining alien observers. Aircraft were deliberately crashing into ships, the pilots making no attempt to escape or survive. These are kamikaze attacks from World War II, Morrison explained. Japanese pilots flew their aircraft directly into enemy ships, knowing they would die in the process. They believed their sacrifice would help their people win the war. The concept of deliberate suicide attacks was so alien to most species that many cadets sat in stunned silence. In their cultures, individual life was precious and never deliberately wasted. The pilots volunteered for these missions, Morrison continued. They wrote letters to their families, said goodbye to their friends, and flew to certain death because they believed it was their duty. Brightwing pulsed with confused energy patterns. How can any being choose to die when they could? Choose to live? What drives such extreme behavior? Morrison paused the footage and turned to face the energy being. Humans will do anything to protect what they consider important. Our families, our homes, our way of life. When these things are threatened, death becomes preferable to defeat. The screens changed again, showing modern human special forces conducting nighttime operations. They moved through darkness using advanced technology, their faces painted black to avoid detection. They eliminated guards silently and vanished before anyone knew they had been there. These are our current elite units, Morrison said. They can operate alone behind enemy lines for months without support. They speak multiple languages, master different fighting styles, and adapt to any culture or environment. The footage showed Special Forces soldiers in different scenarios. Some were dressed as local civilians, blending perfectly into foreign populations. Others were swimming underwater toward enemy positions. Still others were parachuting from aircraft. In complete darkness, they train constantly because they never know what kind of mission they might face, Morrison explained. Desert combat, Arctic warfare, jungle operations, urban infiltration, underwater sabotage. A human special forces soldier must be ready for anything. The alien cadets watched in growing amazement as the footage demonstrated capabilities that seemed impossible. Human soldiers were operating in environments that would challenge the toughest aliens, using tactics that required incredible mental and physical conditioning. But how do you maintain such warriors? Asked a Granite 1 cadet. The physical and mental stress should destroy them. Some don't survive the training, Morrison admitted. Others burn out after a few years. But new volunteers always step forward to take their place. Humans seem to have an endless supply of individuals willing to push themselves to the absolute limit. The presentation took an even darker turn as Morrison showed footage of human endurance in prisoner of war camps. Soldiers who had been captured by enemies continued to resist even under torture and starvation. These men were held captive for years, Morrison said. They were beaten, starved, and tortured, but they never stopped trying to escape or resist. Their captors, many died, but they never surrendered their duty as soldiers. The footage showed emaciated humans who had been reduced to skin and bones, yet still maintained military discipline and tried to support their fellow prisoners. Their dedication was both inspiring and terrifying to the alien observers. "We have a saying," Morrison continued. "Capture is not the end of a soldier's duty. Even as prisoners, humans continue to serve their cause in whatever way possible." More footage showed civilian populations under attack. Instead of fleeing or surrendering, the humans organized resistance movements. Children as young as 12 were shown carrying weapons and messages for adult fighters. When our homelands are invaded, every human becomes a potential soldier, Morrison explained. Age, gender, and profession become irrelevant. Grandmothers build explosives, teenagers serve as scouts, and children carry supplies to fighters. Several more alien cadets left the room, unable to process the idea of entire populations transforming into combatants. In most alien cultures, civilians were protected non-combatants who never participated in warfare. This footage shows the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising during World War II, Morrison said as new images appeared. Humans armed only with pistols and homemade weapons fought against a professional army with tanks and artillery. The footage showed desperate urban combat where humans fought from sewers, rooftops, and bombed out buildings. They had no chance of military victory, but they fought anyway. They knew they could not win, Morrison continued, but they chose to die fighting rather than be killed without resistance. For humans, the manner of death can be more important than death itself. The room was now half empty. Many of the remaining cadets looked physically ill or emotionally shaken. The peaceful species representatives were openly distressed by what they were witnessing. Morrison touched his datapad again, and the screens showed massive explosions that lit up the sky like new suns. Entire cities vanished in moments, replaced by mushroom-shaped clouds that rose into the atmosphere. Nuclear weapons, Morrison said simply. Humans developed the ability to destroy entire planets. We built enough of these weapons to sterilize our own world several times over. The silence in the room was complete. Even the mechanical sounds of the station's life support systems seemed muted. For 50 years, human nations aimed these weapons at each other, ready to fire at a moment's notice, Morrison continued. We called it mutually assured destruction. If anyone attacked us with nuclear weapons, we would respond with enough firepower to end their civilization. Zethkar's scales had turned a pale color that indicated extreme stress among his people. You created weapons capable of destroying your own species, and then pointed them at yourselves? Yes, Morrison replied. Because we understood that sometimes the threat of total destruction is the only thing that prevents war. We were willing to risk extinction to maintain peace. The final footage showed modern human military exercises. Thousands of soldiers, aircraft, ships, and vehicles moved in perfect coordination across multiple continents. The scale of organization was staggering. This represents current human military capability, Morrison concluded. We maintain armed forces that can deploy anywhere in our solar system within hours. We have weapon systems that can strike targets with precision across interplanetary distances. As the presentation ended, Morrison looked around the nearly empty room. The presentation hall remained silent for several minutes after Morrison finished speaking. The few dozen alien cadets who had stayed until the end sat motionless in their seats, trying to process what they had witnessed. Many looked physically sick, while others stared blankly at the now dark screens. Admiral Vorthik finally broke the silence, his crystal body flickering with uncertain colors. Thank you, Colonel Morrison, for that comprehensive presentation. All cadets are dismissed for the remainder of the day. As the aliens slowly filed out of the room, their movements were different from the eager excitement they had shown before. Eviksti moved with jerky, uncoordinated steps instead of their usual precise formations. The Merlins flowed sluggishly, their water-like bodies seeming heavier than normal. Even the energy, being right-wing, appeared dimmer than usual. Danny, Cooper, and the other human cadets gathered around Morrison as the last aliens left the room. The silence felt heavy and uncomfortable. That went about as expected, Morrison said quietly. Command knew this would happen. The question is how many will actually leave. They didn't have to wait long for their answer. Within 2 hours, formal withdrawal requests began arriving at the Academy Administration Office. The first came from the Harmony Collective, whose representatives submitted paperwork for all 6 of their cadets. Due to irreconcilable philosophical differences regarding the nature of military service, read the official statement. The Harmony Collective hereby withdraws all cadets from the Galactic Military Academy Exchange Program. More withdrawals followed throughout the evening. The Merlins submitted a carefully worded request citing incompatible approaches to conflict resolution. 3 of the 4 Luminary cadets chose to leave, with only Brightwing remaining behind by the next morning. The numbers were staggering. Out of nearly 200 alien cadets, 96 had submitted formal withdrawal requests. Almost exactly half the Academy's non-human population was preparing to leave. The Vexti hive mind had split for the first time in their recorded history. Some wanted to learn more about human tactics, while others considered human warfare methods too dangerous to study. The division caused visible distress among the insect-like beings, who had never experienced disagreement within their collective consciousness. Emergency meetings were called at the highest levels of Federation government. Admiral Vorthik found himself fielding angry communications from dozens of species, representatives who demanded explanations for their cadets' exposure to psychologically damaging content. 2 days after the presentation, Elder Suthmira of the Harmony Collective arrived at Kepler Station aboard a diplomatic vessel. She was a tall, graceful being who resembled a walking tree made of living crystal. Her presence radiated the calm peace that her species was known for throughout the galaxy. Morrison and Admiral Vorthik met her in the station's main conference room. The Elder's first words were direct and accusatory. Colonel Morrison, your species has contaminated young minds with images of systematic brutality, she said, her voice like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. Several of our cadets are requiring psychological treatment to recover from what they witnessed. Morrison remained calm. Elder Suthmira, we showed only historical footage of actual human conflicts. We made no attempts to glorify or promote violence. The very existence of such footage proves my point, the Elder replied. No civilized species maintains detailed records of mass slaughter for educational purposes. Your people have turned killing into a science. Admiral Vorthik intervened. Before Morrison could respond, Elder, the Federation Council approved this exchange program knowing that different species have different military traditions. We approved cultural exchange, Suthmera said firmly. We did not approve psychological warfare designed to traumatize young beings. Several member species are now questioning whether humanity should remain in the Federation at all. The conversation continued for hours, but the Elder's position never changed. She viewed human military doctrine as a form of mental contamination that threatened the peaceful nature of galactic civilization. However, not all reactions were negative. Commander Zethkar requested a private meeting with Morrison later that same day. The large Draknari warrior looked troubled but not hostile as they sat together in Morrison's quarters. Your presentation disturbed me greatly, Zethkar admitted, but I cannot deny its effectiveness. In 3 hours, you showed us more tactical innovation than my people have developed in 3,000 years. Morrison poured 2 cups of coffee, offering one to the alien commander. That wasn't our goal. We were just showing our history. Perhaps, Zethkar said, accepting the cup but not drinking from it. But I have been studying warfare for most of my life, and I recognize superior methods when I see them. Your species has survived by becoming the most efficient killers in known space. The Draknari commander was quiet for a moment before continuing. Some of my people find this horrifying, but I find it ... impressive. Terrifying, but impressive. What does that mean for the program? Morrison asked. It means some of us want to learn more, Zethkar replied. Not to become like humans, but to understand how you think. Your tactical adaptability could be valuable in the right circumstances. Other meetings followed over the next few days. Representatives from various species came to discuss their concerns, their fears, and in some cases, their grudging respect for human military capability. The rock-like Granadiones were split down the middle. Half viewed human warfare as chaotic and undisciplined, while the other half respected the effectiveness of human tactics. The energy-based Luminari were similarly divided, with some finding human warfare psychologically disturbing and others fascinated by the complexity of human military thinking. A week after the presentation, Admiral Vorthik called another meeting with Morrison. This time, they were joined by several other high-ranking Federation officials who had traveled to Kepler Station specifically for this discussion. Colonel Morrison, Vorthik began, I need to share some classified information with you. The real reason Earth was invited to join the Federation military structure. Morrison leaned forward, sensing that something important was about to be revealed. Our long-range sensors have detected signs of an approaching threat, Vorthik continued. Ships of unknown design are moving toward our outer territories. Their technology appears to be unlike anything we have encountered before. Another official, a tall blue-skinned being with multiple arms, added more details. Initial contact attempts have failed. The unknown ships have destroyed several of our scout vessels without warning or negotiation. We believe, Vorthik said, slowly, that the Federation may soon face its first real war in over 2 centuries. And based on what we've learned about your species, we suspect that humans are the only ones truly prepared for such a conflict. Morrison felt a chill run down his spine. You're saying you brought us into the Federation because you need soldiers who know how to fight real wars. Yes, Vorthik admitted. Most Federation species have evolved beyond the need for serious military conflict. We have forgotten how to fight for survival. But humans ... humans never forgot. The implications were staggering. The peaceful Federation, which had existed for centuries without major warfare, was now facing an enemy that didn't follow their civilized rules of engagement. The cadets who withdrew from the program, Morrison said, they may have made the right choice. Perhaps, Vorthik agreed. But the ones who stayed, the ones who want to learn from your people, they may be our only hope of survival. As the meeting concluded, Morrison realized that the human presentation had done more than shock alien cadets. It had revealed a fundamental truth about the galaxy. When faced with an enemy that fought without honor or restraint, only those prepared for total warfare would survive. The cadets who had fled after witnessing humanity's military history were avoiding more than just disturbing footage. They were avoiding preparation for a war that could determine whether their species continued to exist. Back in the training areas, the remaining alien cadets began working more closely with their human counterparts. Brightwing had requested specialized training in human tactical thinking. Several Draknari warriors wanted to learn about human adaptability techniques. Even some Vexti were asking about human methods of improvisation and individual initiative. The academy was quieter now, with half its students gone. But those who remained seemed more serious, more focused. They had seen what real warfare looked like, and they understood that their peaceful galaxy might soon need defenders. Who could match humanity's capacity for effective violence? As Morrison watched mixed groups of human and alien cadets training together, he wondered if they were witnessing the birth of something new. Perhaps the galaxy was about to learn that sometimes the only way to preserve peace was to become very, very good at war. The withdrawn cadets had made their choice. The remaining ones would discover whether they could adapt to humanity's way of thinking before it was too late.